Welcome to the scheduled live about communication around sex, sexual desires, and intention. I'm going to share quickly what was the reason for creating this live. It was someone wrote to me. So I was doing another live earlier, and then I realized that one of these reflections really needs like a separate live, and in reality it needs lots of days. I thank you for joining, Jessica. So this live is spurred by someone asking how to communicate sexual interest without feeling creepy. And from there I felt like this is connected to a bigger topic, and it's a big topic. And I am basically doing this just impulsively, as in speaking into what comes up for me, with the exception of making a few notes. That's how I tend to do my lives, and it's also how I tend to do my courses and my guidance, is that I'm not following a script. I am speaking into what's alive in the moment and what feels authentic for me. So when it comes to communication about sexual energy, I think it's first really important to be aware of that I would say the majority of what one thinks of sexual energy really is sensual energy or a life force, and they're all interconnected and they're all the same. But I would say that most people are so disconnected from their bodies and their energy that it takes a huge surge for people to be aware of their bodies. Because this has been the reality of me, is that for now, I feel turned on by life and by anything and everything around me all the time. So through there, I'm also starting to distinguish different types of sexual energy and sensual energy. So I want to speak into how, for instance, our sacral chakra, which is our sexual and genital centers, that gives energy. And in fact, I feel very strongly that no matter what authority you are in human design, that it's natural to feel excited or some kind of turned on when something is good for you. Meaning that if you're talking to someone, if you're reading something, if you're feeling a kind of a pull, that's attraction, or just your body igniting, that's a very strong positive sign that something is good for you. And this is what most people really tends to confuse. And I think that anyone who's also working with sexuality is still discovering, I know I am all the time as well, discovering deeper and deeper layers of this. That a lot of the things really, there's attraction, but often one doesn't really understand what the attraction is about until one has started to open up more curiosity around it. Maybe one is actually meant to, anything from do a course together, to have someone as a mentor, to read that post and learn from it, to start a friendly connection, to have a sexual interaction. So there's so many things, but the thing is that since there's so much shaming around sexuality, and most people find it incredibly hard to speak about desires and sex and shame and taboo and guilt and fear of rejection and all these things, then often it gets to be a lot of confusion around what's really what. And that's how I felt with that kind of question about how to communicate without feeling creepy, is that I think if one is feeling, if there's an echo inside of that there is some kind of creepy, then that is often usually, I think, a sign that there is something to uncover within, as in there's some unclarity around either that particular connection or about around one's own energy. And I think I want to speak a little bit more in general before I go into exactly that again, is that, yeah, I just want to say that I think it's pretty important to be aware that when one is open up any discussion around sexual attraction, sexual energy, and sexual desires, then it's going to be a lot of potential landmines. Because it's so scrambled. How, just think about also, if we put it into general, how boys and girls are taught about how and what sex is. Because what is, if you think of from a tantra perspective, then it's easier for a female body to give from the heart, to open up about emotions, and it's really difficult to open up the yoni, as in the vagina. Whereas for a male body, it's so much easier for a male body to give from the penis, and it's really difficult to give from the heart. And by difficult, I mean that it's harder for a male body usually to express emotions. And this is from the tantra perspective, but also if you see in society in general, then it's usually easier and more encouraged for a girl to speak about her emotions, and whereas it's not the same usually for boys. And also that is often more allowed, that little boys can stand there and, you know, drag their little penis and everything will laugh and it's fine. Whereas if a little girl will touch her vagina, then usually that is a different story. And so the thing is that from very early on, we are conditioned to think differently around both communication and what sex is about. And first now I want to speak into the one who is making a lot of comments now. If you can please hold your comments to relevant, because I am trying to do this live and also pay attention if someone wants to share something. But if you are commenting all the time, it's really just a distraction without adding anything to it. So thank you. And I want to also speak into how it's really difficult for different, I mean, from someone who is, of course, in a male body or in a female body when it comes to hormones. Like the levels are not going to be the same, because you can have a female body that has more testosterone than a male body. So I'm going to speak in general. So in general, some has much more, a male body can have much more testosterone in general, and this will ignite often a more stronger sex drive. And if you combine this with having a difficult time expressing from the heart, expressing from emotions, then what it comes down to is that very often male bodies tends to seek intimacy and love through sex. And whereas you often have the opposite that's conditioned into girls and women, is that sex is only something you do when it's love, otherwise you're a whore. So this is a Madonna whore complex that is really haunting a lot of, and lying underneath a lot of communication between men and women. And as I've written before, I am sorry about the heteronorm and generalization. If I were to cover all the different varieties, it would take a long time. So please bear with me as I am trying to focus on this live, because of the intention is someone who is a male body is expressing vulnerability around how to communicate to women when it comes to sexual desire and interest. And so I did a live around this earlier, and then some of the things probably I will cover again or say again, but I'm trying to keep like the overall kind of subject. So I do feel that it's really important to first be clear that someone being in their sensual or sexual energy is not an automatic invitation. That someone is expressing it is not an invitation. That you find it sexy is not in itself for you permission to do anything. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges as a woman, and I'm sure there are men that experience this and others as well, is that it's really, really difficult when somehow a lot of people think that just because you're like me, for instance, now in red, then that is an automatic, as if I'm asking for someone to comment or give me sexual energy. I can go naked in the street and still I'm not asking for it ever. Asking for it is using those words. Asking for it would look like, hi, I'm in my sexual energy, you want to join me? And that is exactly what I feel is really lacking from, it should really be the first things that one speaks to children when they're super young. I know I had with my daughter is that sexual energy requires consent. So she started asking me when she was 3 or 4 years old, and I've been saying the whole time is that sexual energy is fun, is a huge part of the fun in life, and to allow her to cultivate and explore if she wants to, and also be aware that it requires consent if others are involved. And I've been saying to her that it's something that adults, if it's going to be more than with herself, then it needs to wait until she's an adult. And of course I am now starting to say this was when she was 4, so now I'm speaking into a different way now and saying that the consent needs to be when she is a teenager. Then if she starts to feel interest with someone, that is something else. But really it's so important that, I'm going to say this was in the picture that I was using to advertise this live, is that if you can't talk about it, should you be doing it? And the reality is that there are still adults that are not able to express anything around sexuality, and they've still been having sex since they were young, and they're still in a relationship where they're not able to discuss sex, but they might still have sex. And I think it's really, really important that we change this in the world, that speaking about sex and sexual energy and sensual energy, permission and consent, that is something that's natural. And okay, I just need to write down a few names to block later, so I'm sorry about that. It's just someone who is harassing all of my lives. Okay. And I'm falling a little bit off now. Sorry, I'm going to keep back to topic. And that is the vulnerability around sexuality and sensuality, is how it includes for all parties rejection, and that actually expressing to someone a sexual interest can actually also be a rejection of that person, as it can be minimizing that person to just being about sex. That's at least my personal experience when I'm posting something, I'm coming with a message, and then someone is just writing about my looks. It's a little bit like a feeling like I'm minimized, like I'm marginalized into I am only valuable because of my looks. And as a woman even more, I think that is even more like vulnerable in terms of suddenly that only being connected to a certain age. Like what would happen if my looks is what determines my desirability, what happens when one grows older? That was a little bit sidetracked, and I'm just gonna write down another name to block. Okay. So I want to make it clear that of course comments and reflections are so welcome, also if you're watching this in the replay. And the reason why I'm writing some down is because there's someone who is not respecting me or the topic, and it's someone who is doing the same in my inbox. So please don't be discouraged for making comments and staying. But what this is also really connected to being able to feel connection to one's own sexual energy, and also having that super important piece of consent. And I think the world would be very different if imagine if your first sexual experience, I don't know, how was yours? If anyone feels like sharing that in the live now, writing it, or in the replay, is that it's quite often a lot of fumbling, a lot of weirdness. I know that a lot of people share that they didn't even understand what was happening until suddenly they had sex. And I know this can be a lot of shame also for males. And I think it would be a very different story if we, as then young adults or kids coming into teenage years and starting to have all these hormones and things happening, is that, I know a lot of people also learn from porn, right? And there's no permission and consent, there's no feelings. Okay, I'm just gonna read. It was terrible, very rushed, and was over before I knew it. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that's a very normal story to share. And I also heard how this feels for the boy involved, how incredible shameful, and this can kind of haunt them from the rest of their lives, even how they feel like they're failures. And so it's that really important piece of being able to cultivate one's own sexual energy. And of course the live I did earlier was all about that, so I'm trying to add something new to this live. And is that, for instance, if one is then starting to, I can just reread here, since it's, yes, I'm sure it wasn't just terrible for me. Yeah, it's very confusing, and this is how it continues in generation for generations of teenagers or young adults just fumbling around and not understanding. And I was married, and I know that in that relationship it was really difficult to express and around sexuality, and I as a person have always been very open about it, but it was really difficult in that relationship, and it has been in some afterwards too, not lately but for a while, because people are not used to communicate, people are lacking words. And so it's that important piece of consent. Like, are you trying to push and force your interest, or is it an expression of it? And before you get to that point of trying to express, so I'm just gonna first say that what I'm coming back to is how to communicate sexual energy and interest without feeling creepy. It's really then to get super clear in one's body of what is happening here. Is there some actual sexual interest from the other person? And where in my body, as if I'm feeling it, if I'm feeling a sexual interest to someone, I immediately go into my body and I stay present and I feel into what is here to explore. And one thing that has become very aware of me is that just because I'm speaking to someone and feeling a bodily reaction, just because I have a penis doesn't mean that it's a sexual attraction. And this has also opened up for me a different way of communicating with women, because what is also very natural for me now is that I can speak to a woman and I can feel sexual energy happening in my body. And as of up until now, I haven't been with a woman, and I don't know if I will be with one or not. For me, that is just, I think sexuality in a lot of ways is independent of gender and sex and the kind of any kind of defined labels as heterosexual or bisexual and all these things. But I do think they can speak into a preference that they're at the moment. And it's because I open up to this, that just because my pussy is getting wet or tingly doesn't mean that I am sexually interested. It just means that my body, as my sacral chakra, is lighting up and saying, hell yes, this is great. Like, just saying that now, I can feel, you know, my pussy is like tingling and she's excited because she gets to be part of this communication. And she gets to be talked about, you know, this is part of us, and that tends to be so shamed. And so that is something to first then, in the how to communicate any kind of interest, is that with oneself, get clear on that inside, that a lot of it isn't necessarily that there needs to be any kind of interaction with the sexual energy. And then is that time of permission. And that's something I myself really have to be really aware of. It's so easy, right, to just have this kind of good idea or desire or intention, whatever, and then just want to just blur it out. But what I experience a lot, because a lot of people message me, is that, you know, it's not in itself something wrong with what the person is conveying towards me, but I am not in the presence of a mind at that moment to receive that. And that can be anything from my daughter having a meltdown and then someone is sending me, you know, some kind of compliment or whatever, and I'm just like, not the moment. And I think that's the most important piece to be aware of when it comes to expressing things virtually, as in, you know, through social media or SMS or any kind of communication, is that be really, really mindful of, you don't know what the, you know, situation of the person that you're sending it to is in. Okay, I'm just gonna read. What if you're just curious? You want the other one to get to know you. How can we be seen if we are not on her map? Okay, the direct answer to that is that first one also needs to get clear on why do I want to be seen by this person if she is not aware of me. Because what can often happen, this is something I'm uncovering with myself, and it's been really fun to uncover, is that for a while I tended to be interested in men that were not available. And I'm not speaking about married or things like that. I'm speaking about men that were living on the opposite side of the world and that were not really paying attention to me. And somehow my energy was surging and I wanted so much to get the attention. And I was observing this. Sorry, it gets getting really warm. I'm sitting in front of the fire, so I need to take off the wool jacket. And I then met this kind of desire with curiosity. It's like, what is it underneath there? And through that, this doesn't really happen anymore now, because I'm getting clear on there's parts of me that wants to have that kind of acknowledgement, that's trying to those Virgo men. Yes, exactly. Virgo men, that's been my vice. And it's that kind of getting clear on that there are parts of me that wanted to really, just like a little girl or something, to be seen like, look at me, and then thinking that if this unavailable man suddenly changed his, and started liking me, then that would prove my worthiness or my sexiness or my, my value in some way. And so getting clear on that kind of wounding has changed that so much. And that is something one that like kind of first got to me, is they would leave it like that. Because in my experience as a woman, I would say that trying to gain the attention of someone through compliments is really not worth it. Okay, let's see. Jessica was writing, "Bien there, sister. So glad to be done with that now." Yes, it's a relief. And someone is, if I'm a Virgo to know, I'm a Libra with a lot of Leo. That's where this comes in, and all my fire. And okay, I have a question. I feel attraction, but she does not know me. Do I need to make a very clear, interesting Instagram profile? I'm gonna say again, this is in the category of trying to get really attention from someone, that, like, ask yourself why. Because what I learned in my experience of noticing all this attraction towards men that were not really available for me is that, first of all, there were parts of me that were not really available, since I was looking for someone who was opposite side of the world and not noticing me. Because it's getting to that kind of self-worth of, I am worthy of someone who thinks that I am as fantastic as I am, that I do not need to go through jumping through loops in order to be seen. Because so for me, it's about equality. It's about not entering into any kind of relation where one is feeling like one is begging for it. And if I am, that's what keeps coming to me, really. And I'm gonna read, I wish you a blessed Christmas, like you're open about what most people are afraid to talk about. Yeah, it's been something I've been doing since I was born. It pisses off some people and it attracts other people. And I'm gonna speak into myself, is that, for instance, people coming to my inbox and giving me compliments is hardly ever a way, for instance, at least in my to get my attention. Really, other than if it's a heartfelt, just to express is something else. But I actually have a lot of problems receiving compliments because so many, I'm going to say I'm sorry again, because women do this too, but in particular a lot of men, for me it feels like this compliment is like a Trojan horse. So they are sending in a compliment because they really just want to get something from it. And it's not a good way to start any kind of connection in my perspective. And it's a different thing that if, for instance, one has a close relationship with someone or established someone, and then to have interest, that is also, can be challenging. And it's that kind of being prepared to be rejected, and really is important. And again, about being really, really clear. And what I know that in my perspective, I hear from other women as well, is that it can be really frustrating if one thinks that one has a true friendship with someone, and then one discovers that actually underneath is just this person just wants to bed you. And the challenge is that this is a wound that will be there, so this will automatically come up. I think for a lot of women is that why is this made all about sex? And I'm gonna jump a little bit to why communication about sex is fun, because it's interesting. Before I started to jump into conscious sexuality, I was in the mind that, talking about it would just kill it, and that is not true. Because what's really, really fun when you start to have connections where you can truly express all of your desires, and you know that it's safe and you can create more safety in that space, that's when you get to also really be able to explore and go deeper. That's when you can start to expand into what sex is. But that is really important then, to be able to express both a clear yes and a clear no. And it's really, really important to also have things like safe words and that clarity of, like, for instance, some are not daring to say that I do not like it when you touch me like that, or I do not like it, or I would want you to put a finger up in my anus. These things can feel very vulnerable, and it's really important, both as in expressing it and receiving it, that one is in a presence of mind of allowing anything and everything. And oh my god, yes, I used to think it would kill the mood, but it's so sexy being asked for consent and being respected. Yes, exactly. That's also when one can jump into the juiciness of, for instance, exploring kinks. And it's funny because a lot of people think that kink is all about bondage, or like quite extreme. But kink can be first of all, that's something we can use also in regular life, and that's something one can use in a self-pleasure, as in exaggerating an emotion in order to get completely experience it. And that's something I've learned as well when it comes to kink about sex, is about actually discovering, and remember what I guide people in is essential shadow work, is that often a lot of our desires and wishes are so deep buried within that we are not even super aware, or even aware that we have that desire. And I know all about that because the past years I've just been journeying deeper and deeper, and what I now think of as normal is things that I wouldn't even imagine even was possible, 10 years ago, or even 2 years ago and 1 year ago. So is something I really just want to like implore how much fun, not implore, but I mean express how much fun it gets to be, and much more fun it gets to be when one can start to have kind of light conversation around even things that before we wouldn't even dare to admit to ourselves. And that also, yeah, opens up a lot of the fun exploration. And I think, and that's one of, someone was asking of why about cheating. The challenge is question why we cheat. And I think that's a little bit of a complex, and what I'm going to say now is not the solution to everything, but I do think a lot of the reason why there is sometimes a lot of cheating in relationships is because of uncommunicated desires. Is because there's some like parts of the person, both when it comes to sexuality and when it comes to personality, that they're not daring to express and be with in a relationship. And I think that's why also there's a lot of stories of actually relationships deepening after a cheating, because that cheating brought to surface something that wasn't working, and then that wound, when if one wants to, resulted in sitting down and getting to a deeper communication. And so that's something, again, is that really communication is a key to not only more pleasure and fun and getting more of what you want, but it's also that kind of deeper connection to the person you're with and building that bond. And that also then comes down to, I would say, if we then go back to wanting attention from someone that is not noticing us, is that it's like just having like a little bit of a really what's the word, reality check, is that if this person actually be what I want in a relationship? Will this person actually give me what I want in a relationship? And I think that is something that is really, like, you know, having that, I truly believe it's so important to cherish also our mind's capacity to be able to think in these ways, and is that to not let our desire or sexual energy always run off, but actually be in control of it. And in control, I do not mean to suppress it or deny it. I mean more that to really just let it build and add to one's life. And then also making decisions that are gonna keep building your life, and not doing and saying things or sending it out, which results in not so good experiences. And I just want to read my challenge with this from the other side of it. I often share compliments and even just love for someone, unattached and unconditional, but it often gets understood as flirt, and they attach to me and want more. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's my experience too, is that I'm a natural, very loving and open person, and it is a challenge that a lot of people think that as an invite, or that I'm hitting on them. And yeah, it's I guess for me, it just, the more I'm still journeying with this. And what's been really important for me though is to notice the echo inside of the shame of me thinking that something is wrong with me because this happens. And as I said that, I got like this really strong inner knowing that that is also why, you know, the purpose of attracting it, because I believe anything and everything we attract really holds some kind of medicine, and by medicine I mean some kind of gift for us to explore. And you know, it's so every time we kind of get to look at what's happening from different perspectives. Well, I hope this has given some value. Is there any more? Like this honestly can continue talking for hours and hours. I'm just trying to keep the lives and the recordings not that super long, so it's easier to watch. And so what I'm saying is that being clear on your own intention being aware of the need for consent and that permission part. I just want to add to this could also be, you know, in a committed relationship, that even knowing each other for years, it sometimes can lead to rejection because when one brings something up, because that person isn't in the right presence of mind at that moment. So that's why it's really, really important to have that kind of piece of asking, like, are you available? Do you have the presence of mind now to sit down and listen to what I want to share? And not just blurt it out or expect or demand the other person to be available, and also be aware of, you know, the timing of it all. Okay. Thank you for your shares and being here, Jessica. And yeah, if anything comes up later, send them to me. And I do not feel complete. Again, I could continue, but it feels like this was what I wanted to express in this live. Thank you for being here.